Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's long-range technical forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This analysis is being provided for perspective only, and any decision made based upon this presentation is the sole responsibility of the person making the decision. Finally, please remember that all long-range weather forecasting is speculative by nature. Well, I got to start you off with a really neat animation here. While I'm not a geologist and I certainly don't study earthquakes, I am a big fan of really great animations, and this was what it looked like to see the earthquake that hit southern Idaho yesterday on March 31st, which was magnitude 6.5. This was what it was, how we were able to see how seismographs across North America saw the waves coming out of this. Just an impressive animation as we watch this geological feature move across North America. Now, speaking of things moving across North America, I want to take you to Bismarck, North Dakota yesterday evening and look at this massive supercell that we caught on radar. Now, this was a little bit of a surprise for me because the big leading wave that came out of the Pacific Northwest, I've been watching it much more closely for its major snow threat for this area later on this week. So out ahead of it to see this massive supercell with a very well-defined hail core. You can see all the pinks and purples inside of that circle that I just drew there. This was a pretty powerful storm that went racing through parts of western North Dakota. This is what we've got forecast for them, though. That deeper wave that's coming out here is going to be sending a very interesting looking snow swath. Look how it stretches in parts of Idaho and Montana and pulls up into Manitoba with potentially very heavy snowfall, while leaving parts of the Canadian prairies in southern Saskatchewan and Alberta relatively snow-free, but certainly bringing some snow amounts through the Dakotas, and we're going to take a look at those amounts in just a few moments. Now, we already have winter weather advisories, winter storm watches, and winter storm warnings out for that area, and my bigger concern about this will be the flood threat as we increase it here over the Red River of the North, something we're also going to take a look at here in just a few moments. But to kind of continue on this weirder view of things, I just want to go back and show you this video that Kelsey, allowed us all to share, which is in Richland, Washington. So as that trough swept through, it actually produced a storm that made a tornado in Washington state as well, which is quite rare. So take a look at this. Here's the hail report from Bismarck. Here's the tornado report from Washington. What we were mostly focusing on was the severe weather events that were happening over the southeast. That was what got a lot of the attention. And what you can see here is that picture on the right was one of those storms producing a pretty powerful and large tornado that went through southern Alabama. Now, I don't yet have from the National Weather Service the ranking of that storm and the tornado that produced, but it did what appeared to be quite a bit of damage. And there were even several water spouts out in the Gulf of Mexico from the storm system that pulled through. Well, this is where it ended up early this morning. So the sun was rising here, and this was the low pressure system spinning off the east coast. And we zoomed in and got a great animation of that circulation just off the east coast here. And this is just so impressive to see how tight that circulation is. But what's forcing it to look like this is also one of the reasons why over the next few days that storm system isn't moving anywhere. In fact, it is forecasted a little bit of a loop-the-loop right here before heading out into the open ocean. So this could keep cloud cover and some stronger waves hitting the east coast of the United States as we wait for the storm system to exit. So very just interesting and peculiar set of weather events been going on here. But we need to translate this into a forecast. So let's talk about the major components of this upcoming forecast. One of them is going to be the strength and position of the subtropical jet stream. So here's your upper level winds today. Here's that cutoff low that's going to continue to cause that system I just showed you to stay in place. But I need to be asking myself, so what is going on with the polar jet stream, and how is it going to be interacting here with the subtropical jet stream? So let's get into this, all right? Here is my main point. In other words, if you remember nothing else from this video, will you remember this, please? This looks at the month of March. These are temperature anomalies across North America. What I'm going to make a case for is that it's going to take something substantial to knock this pattern out. So when I look out over the month of May, while we're seeing some inconsistencies in the models in their forecasts, what I'm going to say is to get rid of the warm bias in the east and southeast and the cold bias that is here over parts of the Canadian prairies in the west is going to take something substantial, and I'm going to have to look and find it and forecast it well to figure out if that's going to occur. If I can't find it, I don't have a reason to tell you things are going to change. Here's the other bullet point. The long-range forecast for the month of March, if they had any sort of a bias that's notable right now, it's that they were too dry and too cool inside of this area. I'll put a star in it there. So therefore, any long-range forecast coming up, I think we're going to have to make sure that we incorporate that bias into the forecast, all right? So what does that March given us? Well, take a look at this. This is growing degree day anomalies for the month of March. The warmth over parts of the south and southeast has given us an additional, compared to normal, 150 to 250 GDUs. So that means if you average about 10 to 15 a day getting collected this time of year, we're talking about 20 plus days ahead of normal on spring. Where the trough, the cooler, the wetter, and cloudier weather has been out in the western part of the United States, we're sitting behind normal, like in parts of the Central Valley of California or Southern California, Southern Nevada, and Arizona. So with that, what has been going on in terms of precipitation? Well, certainly here from Texas all the way over to South Carolina, up into the eastern part of the Corn Belt and the Ohio Valley, it's been extremely wet. Precipitation amounts just over the last month have topped 10 to 12 inches in some locations here. And it's been quite wet across much of the rest of the country. Now, to put that into context, I want to show you this map. And I know it's a little bit hard to read, but you can see the color bar, so let's start there. The closer you get to these colors, well, 1 would represent being the wettest over the last 40 years. And the closer you get to these colors, well, 40 would represent the driest in the last 40 years. And we're looking specifically at how March 2020 compares. So the driest regions by far have been down here along the Gulf Coast, especially into Florida, where we may have some places be the driest we've seen in the last 40 years. Same thing for parts of the Pacific Northwest. But you can see the influence of the subtropical jet stream and those troughs that come sweeping through. We've kept this area very active, we've kept this area very active, and this area as well. So the question is, are those regions going to stay that way? I've got to see something that's going to tell me otherwise. Okay, that's my main story here. So let's talk snow right now as we think about the preconditions that are in place to possibly increase our flooding threat. Rewind the clock back to March 30th. That was the last time I had a good, almost cloud-free day view of the Dakotas and Minnesota. And we can see that a lot of the snow up here is gone. In fact, what you're looking at riding through here is fog, okay? So with that snow melting away, this is what we have as of the 1st of April in snow water equivalent. It's just a narrow corridor riding through here in the United States, in northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the UP of Michigan, where we still have snow. Now, yes, we're going to be adding snow into this area, but we're going to put that into context in just a few moments. Look at how much has melted in the last 24 hours. While this has increased the spring flooding that's going on over the Red River of the North, melting that snow away now versus later is going to be critical for our upcoming spring flooding forecast for the rest of the river systems. Because right now, this is where things currently sit. So when you see each one of these dots, you're only seeing the dots that are near flood stage or in minor, moderate, or major flooding. And if you look, this is honestly relatively normal for the Mississippi River this time of year. I mean, it typically floods in spring. But the Red River of the North up here, I want to show you what the river gauges are forecast to be. So right now through April 1st, we are in moderate flood stage near Fargo, but it's anticipated to go up into major flood stage as we work our way into the end of this week. Now, this is nothing compared to what we saw back in 1997, where flood stage hit, I think, if I remember back correctly, 57 feet. But still, we're going to have a flood fight on our hands on the Red River of the North. Now, here's another critical component when we talk about snow. I want you to keep your eye right in through here, okay? Now, I'm going to animate this forward and show you several days over the last 15 days of that particular region. And what you see here is you can see the clouds move, but underneath it, the permanent white, that's where there's snow. There is a storehouse of colder air sitting on top of this snow that leads me to believe that we could allow it to come out into the northern plains, into Montana, and into the Dakotas until that snow goes away. Plus, snowpack here in this part of the Rocky Mountains and the coastal ranges of British Columbia is way above average. And speaking of snow, take a look at what our basin average snow water content numbers look like right now. Much of the West, including the Cascades and the Rockies here, are sitting between 80 and 120%. That's excellent. And we want to keep that snow there as long as possible. We don't want a lot of spring melt. We want late spring and summer melt. That's great for irrigation. We will be adding to these numbers over the Sierra Nevada as well in the coming days. So we put it all together. What we want to think about here is, where do we already have elevated flood threat, even if April rains are normal? And it's in through this area. And that's simply because of how wet things were in winter and early spring. We have elevated soil moisture anomalies here to the tune of 2 to 5 inches. So even if spring is forecast to be normal in terms of rainfall, we will have elevated flood threat every time something comes in, which means tighter windows in this area, all right? Now, what could be promoting those windows to tighten up? Let's go straight to this upcoming week. So let's start on Monday. This is a jet stream pattern that typically means active. What is it? We can see we're blocked up out here in the Pacific with an omega block. That ridge pulling into the Gulf of Alaska is critical to this. We then have a trough dipping down into the west coast of the United States. Great for California snowfall, but as it runs over the top of this ridge, yes, a lot of warmth east, but the storm track is going to run right through the middle there. And because of that, we're seeing this in terms of total precipitation through next Wednesday. So as that trough develops out west, we're increasing precipitation totals in the Sierra Nevada, as you can see here. As the first trough sweeps through, this is the area we're expecting to see some snow and then rain out ahead of it, slowly pushing through as the front migrates in this direction. That front tends to linger down here over parts of Texas, which is already battling with a late start to the season due to excessive rain there, and it's going to continue to be fed on Gulf moisture, the details of which I'm going to show you in tomorrow's near-term update. But what we notice is over the next week, we're adding rain across regions that are already showing, flooding. That's basically it. So this is not helping a situation out much at all. As we look at where that snow is going to fall, I want to make one simple point about this. Zooming into the north central plains, as the snow does come in, do I expect it to stay around? No. I think we're going to melt this snow off relatively quickly. So what's more critical than besides just knowing where the heaviest snow bands will be is how much liquid equivalent is in this. In general, we're talking about 1/4 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch of liquid equivalent, which means when this snow melts, we're only going to be adding about that much to the soil. 1/4 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch of liquid equivalent, and that's critical. But out west, we may be adding anywhere between 12 and up to 36 inches of snow to the Cascades and to the Sierra Nevada, which is going to help kind of put the icing on the cake for the snowpack we have in those mountains. So that's overall is a good thing. Now take a look at this as we start to look longer term. GFS ensembles on the left, European ensembles on the right. Now what do they agree on? They definitely agree on the continuation of the strong subtropical jet stream. Nothing's slowing that down. So from Texas through the mid-south and the southeast, the forecast continues to show up wet. But major differences here. See that? We have the GFS showing much wetter and the European showing much drier. Now why are there differences? Because it extends to the northwest as well. Well, the differences are right here. We have seen these models over the last week or so really struggle with the medium range forecast. That's day 10 to 15. What's similar? Well, both models, when you get out here to about the 14th of April, are keeping the trough that's somewhere here south and west of the Aleutian Islands. That's a similarity. They also are trying to build some sort of ridge into the Gulf of Alaska. That's a similarity. Everything else downstream is different. Look at the GFS. Big, deep trough that sweeps from basically central Canada back into the west coast of the United States. And if that happens, the troughs sweep through, run over the southeast ridge, and light up the midsection of the country and the southeast. The European sweeps that trough through, would say keep the eastern part of the United States cool, but dry things out with northwest flow in the central part of the United States. That's where we get convergence. Now, why is there such poor model performance right now for everything beyond day 10? I think it's partly due to the seasonal transition. We're going into spring, accumulating daylight hours. ITCZ is shifting north. We're losing the polar vortex as a dominant factor. We have very weak teleconnections right now. In other words, you're going to see the Southern Oscillation Index is near, well, just slightly negative, but near zero. The MJO can't stay out of its null phase. It keeps going back to it. And we don't really have a strong signal from our global winds. They've dropped back down to normal. And then this is a really cool component of this. I want to talk about ACARS. ACARS is a program where we collect weather information from aircraft and ingest it or assimilate it into our forecast models. With COVID-19 slowing down global air traffic, we're now missing a critical component of the data that we ingest in our models over the Atlantic, which is what you're seeing here, and also over the Pacific. So the comparison is March 2nd to March 30th. Look at the reduction in air traffic. Without having those planes collect weather data, which again we put into our models, we've reduced a major source of good information about the jet stream. And it is the jet stream which I've been detailing for you as showing up with major differences moving forward. So what does all this mean? Well, we've seen the precipitation differences. What about temperatures? Days 6 through 10, both models agree cooler west, warmer east. So this gets you out to about April 11th. But look at the differences for day 11 through 15. The GFS, deep trough, big ridge, warm down here, continuing that pattern. cool where the storehouse of colder air is, but the European sweeps the cold through in on that trough I showed you a few moments ago, and the two could not be more different for the pattern here. And this is a critical difference. What I'm going to come back to is the thing I said a few moments ago. I've got to have overwhelming evidence to overturn March patterns into April, and at this point, I don't have it. That's my main story here. So if we build this out into a bigger discussion, take a look at this first. This is looking globally at the day 11 through 15 temperature anomalies. By far, the one place across the world that is kind of the epicenter for cold air is the Canadian prairies. Compared to normal here, that's the coldest spot. Just want you all to see that. So we come back to these forecasts. This is from the European Ensemble. The European Ensemble says for April 8th through May 8th, that's what you're looking at here, April 8th through May 8th, keep things the way they've been. Do you see it? It says keep that pattern the way it's been. So I think that the models are biased too cold in through this area. I think we'll be much closer to normal. I don't think they're biased too cold right in through here, but I think they're biased a little cold in parts of the Western Corn Belt. I think because of the biases we saw for the month of March, they're going to continue. This means early spring stays on for parts of the South. All right? What is, I think, an important thing to point out, though, is the precipitation forecast. Now, all the models agree subtropical jet stream goes, but the models have been too dry in forecasting this area. I think they're continuing to be too dry in that area. I think that area is going to continue to see near average and at times maybe wetter than average conditions. Is it like 2019 in terms of the frequency? No, it is not. We do not have the same setup as spring 2019. But I think that the models maybe have a little bit of a too dry of a bias there. That's my main conclusions at this point. Where do I get those conclusions? I think that when we look at the tropics versus the polar jet stream, I see these things. Globally, over the next month, I see three very interesting waves. I see the subtropical jet stream contributing to the position of those wetter than average conditions that I just drew for you there. And because of that, it's affecting South America, it's affecting Australia's weather, it's affecting what's going on right here in and around Indonesia and that region, over in the Philippines as well, and southern and southeastern parts of Southeast Asia. And what I think it means in the longer term is the more dominant subtropical jet stream pattern, which has gone right through here over the last month, will likely continue. What are you looking at? Outgoing long-wave radiation. What does that mean? Where you see these warmer colors, we have had more precipitation, more clouds, more convection, and it's going to take the atmosphere a lot to break that down. That's why I don't have overwhelming evidence to overturn the pattern we saw in March as we go into the month of April. That's my case, all right? So I'll put it down into these 7 bullet points. Number 1, I've already talked about this. I have low confidence in our operational models, anything beyond about day 7. Yeah, they're getting it right in some places, but most, there's a major difference beyond day 7. 2, you're not going to hear me talk about the polar vortex much anymore. It is weakening as it normally does, and it's going to become a non-factor at this point. 3, yes, the global winds have calmed back toward normal, and the QBO is negative. That does tend to lead the atmosphere to be more bunchy and blocked up in the flow of the polar jet stream, but like I said, the subtropical jet stream seems to be the dominant factor. The MJO, why have we not been talking about it? It's been not really the main driver of our tropical weather. It's not been the big producer of the global teleconnections, and it's repeatedly failed in getting into cold phases, and it's probably going to do it again. So bullet points 5, 6, and 7, here we go. For my Midwestern farmers, we have elevated flood threat this year, simply because of the saturated soils. So while we're forecasting near normal spring rains, we got to remember we got a lot of water in the soil already. Tighter window seems to be the case throughout the month of April. The jet stream pattern, as I've made a case for, has been shaped by the pre-existing temperature conditions. It'll have to get knocked out of that before I can make a case for any sort of a pattern change for April or even into May. But, and here's my last point today, if spring goes dry for the Midwest, that big area I showed you that has got saturated soils, this is what the atmosphere is going to have to do. We are going to have to build, look over here in the bottom right, troughing over Alaska and the Gulf of Alaska. That will allow a ridge to form in the central Canadian prairies and extend down into the northern U.S. prairies. That's a drier pattern. For that to occur, I must see something that's already started continue, and that is I need the trade winds to keep getting stronger. Unfortunately, stronger the trade winds become, the more we tend to get into La Nina-like patterns, which are warmer spring and summers. So I'm looking here at these two maps at the driest April through Junes for the Midwest, and they featured strong trade winds, which we do have right now, and warm. We're looking at warmth in the Midwest. And we need to see if the pattern allows itself to get blocked up to continue the warmer pattern that we've been seeing. It's one component. I'm going to keep an eye on it for you and report back to you each week. So we'll keep updating this map, these ideas, as we progress through the month of April and then into May. We'll see how tight those planting windows become, but I do have a feeling things will open up at least much wider than we did have in spring of 2019, which overall is very good news as we start April. We'll wrap it up here. Thank you for listening. Talk to you again very soon.